Welcome back to the Briefcase The Barn, episode 18, a series of the Furious Securious show where me and Gary have some real talks about business, Christianity, life, coaching, and much more.
Anything.
Today's segments are Let's Get Personal, where Gary or I answer a personal question, Business Blunders, sharing a humorous or insightful business mistake and lesson, Book Report, we talk about a book we're reading, Furious Securious, something that we're curious about and don't have the answer to, and Personal Playlist, where we share a song or a podcast or an audiobook that resonated with us. So we'll start off the top right away, unless there's something else you want to talk about. Want to give an update on your week, Gary? And how you're doing?
Well, I just said to God, I do not like being put in a box. I do not like the structure.
He doesn't like being controlled.
I don't like being controlled. That is pretty insightful. That is very fair. I'm a total control freak myself. Mm-hmm. Do not like being controlled. Whenever I go on trips or anything, or Maria and I go somewhere and there's like a bus tour, I'm like, find me a rental vehicle. I'm getting in my own vehicle. I'm not getting on that bus with those people and being a prisoner of war for the next 11 hours.
Yes, I can identify with that.
Total tool, right? Like, just get on the bus. So that's where that stems from. The personal question I have is if there was one thing that you could change about your life today, the way your life is right now, what would that be?
Oh man, you're putting me on the spot here. I did not get this question beforehand. Gary told me about it yesterday that he was going to ask me this. There's one thing about my life today I could change. What do I want to change?
Yeah, what do you want to change right now?
Probably some relationships I wish that were healed and mended.
Okay. That'd be the most important thing.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to add more color, or that's good enough?
I mean, you can ask more. I mean, like...
No, that's fair.
No, I mean, I think...
There's broken relationships
in my life, yeah. And I don't think it'd be wise to divulge details on that, but they add stress. I mean, it's not how you want it ideally. And even if you feel like you've been wronged in an ideal scenario, that relationship gets healed and mended, right? And
now, does it get healed and mended if the other person changes something, or could it get healed and mended anyways?
Well, the only thing I can control is myself.
Yeah.
And there's anything I've learned over the years, especially with all the stuff that me and Nicole went through and stuff like that. I mean, we were separated 5 times. Like, we went through the ringer and stuff like that. The one thing I learned is like, hey, you can only ever change one thing, and that's yourself. And so focus on yourself.
On that note, being separated 5 times, what did you learn about, what did you learn through that? What did you learn about marriage through that?
That it's really, really hard, that you should communicate early on. I mean, I think I was like a chronic people pleaser, most of my life, trying to get acceptance from the people around me. And so even when we were dating and through the first part of our marriage, I wouldn't share the things that were bothering me or that I didn't like, or, any criticism or those kinds of things like that. I would just internalize it. And so, that doesn't help, right? You end up building up resentments, or you end up, doing other things, stuff like that.
Shouldn't do.
Yeah.
Okay. Communicate well. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, there was I cheated, right? And so there's way more to the story than just that.
No, I get it.
But like there's,
I guess I just feel like everybody has marriage is hard, and I probably say it too much. Marie thinks I'm a Debbie Downer that way, but I just feel like most people go in way too naive and don't realize how much work it is. And even a good marriage is a lot of work, and it's hard. So I think I think I have a good marriage. I mean, I feel like Marie and I are doing well. I just feel like in our culture, it's way too romanticized, and it is a beautiful thing, but it's meant to be the analogy in the Bible might be, something that's a lot tougher and a lot more challenging. And when I think it's Paul that says, love her as Christ loved the church, right? And that's really sacrificially. Most of us don't realize what that means. Most guys aren't prepared to get on the cross for their wife. Yeah. But that is literally the call. So I think it's just, as a man, there's a real challenge there, and a real commitment to being really, really gracious and loving towards a woman, even when your needs are not being met, or even when things are not going well. So anyways.
Yeah, I mean, going into it, I thought I knew a lot. Like, I remember listening to me and Nicole had just started dating, and I had not been a Christian that long, and so I was just like full pull. I had to do everything perfectly. And so I was listening to Paul Washer, and Paul Washer has you're supposed to do like devotions together and all these things like that when you're dating. And so we were on one of our first dates, and I was dropping her off.
You got out the book?
And no, I was just like, we're gonna pray, and we're gonna together, and and I'll do a little devotion, whatever else like that. And so like I prayed, and then I'm just like waiting for Nicole to start praying, because I would pray the first part and she would finish, and I'm not hearing anything. I look beside me, open my eyes, and she's sitting beside me crying. I'm like, what is going on? And so like that. And so I thought I had it together and that I knew what I was getting into, but I certainly did not. Yeah. But even things like sex and stuff like that was never talked about growing up, or any of those things like that. It was just
no practical input. No.
So
figure it out.
Okay. Business blunders, sharing humorous or insightful business mistakes and lessons. Let's talk about hedging the US dollar in 2017.
Yeah, I think it was 2017. So I had bought stuff out of the US and sold stuff into the US, but predominantly bought stuff out of the US in my businesses since 2008, and always buying US dollars to purchase US goods. So people that don't run a business, I mean, they probably just don't think about it.
Yeah.
And it's actually very interesting that we're having this conversation now, because in the last week,
just to clarify that, you were taking Canadian dollars and
turning
buying
them into US dollars, and then buying stuff.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, well.
And why did you not buy directly into just right away? Why didn't you just buy with Canadian dollars?
Well, you always have to buy US dollars, right? Like you're always buying. If you're buying from a US hay grower, for example, you're writing a US check. I have a US account.
Okay.
I'm transferring the money. Somebody's exchanging that money. They're making a margin on it.
Yeah. Okay.
If you do it at your own bank, when you go to Mexico, you'll pay 3 or 4% or more.
Yeah.
If you do it through a broker like I do, you'll pay a very small fee. If anyone wants a referral on the brokerage that I use, if you do large amounts, they're great. Very small cost. Good people. I use Bendex. Anyways, in 2017, I was not using them. I was using a different company, which will remain unnamed. They actually went bankrupt. Years in COVID, they went bankrupt, and I'll explain why in a minute. But basically what happened in 2017, part of the story that's fascinating is for years I'd been buying US dollars and, let's say 50,000 a month, 100,000, maybe in a big month, 300,000 in a month.
And so you weren't buying as you needed to buy stuff in the States. You were buying.
No, I typically was.
Okay.
I typically do. But what happened was, I would think, the US dollar is pretty cheap right now in relation to the Canadian dollar. I'll buy a contract, and that's the part of the story that gets interesting.
Yeah.
So there's different way contracts you can buy, and I don't even totally understand. There'll be people that are listening to this that understand this way better than me, so I'm not pretending to be knowledgeable here, and you'll really realize how not knowledgeable I am in a minute. So I'm buying the forward contract, and you can buy a basic forward contract where you will pay a little premium on top, right?
Yeah.
Let's just say 0.2% on top, and then that will allow you to get the US dollars 60 days later, and you're basically fixing your price. Well, I started doing options contracts, and they weren't only like basic options contracts where there's someone on the other side of the trade. I was like in like leveraged, like high risk contracts. The guy was selling them to me. He probably made a pretty hefty fee selling them to me.
Okay, so like layman's term this stuff.
Layman term it. Basically what happened was, actually this is exactly what happened. So let's just say the dollar, it's $1.30 Canadian to buy $1 US dollar.
Yeah.
Or today, let's just use today's amount. It's $1.40 today. That's how bad this has gotten in the last 6 months. It's like 10%. We're having Canadian dollars just getting crushed because our economy's in the toilet, right? So we basically, we're at $1.40 today. I would basically say in 6 months from now, at the end of 6 months, I would get to buy $100,000 at $1.39 to, at $1.39, let's say. But what would happen is if the dollar swung the other way, where let's just say it went down to $1, if at any point it crossed below $1.36 in that period between the time when I had made the contract and the end date, if it crossed below that, it would double up and I would have to buy 200,000 US at 142 or something like that.
Okay.
Well, I started doing.
But if it went the other way,
it would be fine.
Okay, so if it was if it went up to 146, you could still buy at 140.
Yeah, and I'm probably not explaining exactly. It's just I have so little actually understanding of what I was agreeing to, and that's the bizarre part of the story. So all of a sudden, what happened was the dollar swung crazy in that time period. It was 2016 or 17. I think it was 16, actually, the end of 16, early 17. And all of a sudden, all these contracts started doubling up. And I was getting emails saying, oh, you owe this amount. And I'm just bleeding cash. Like I'm writing checks at them. I got a huge overdraft and I'm just deep into my overdraft. And I remember going to the accountant at the year end, going over my financial statements for, I think it was 2017, and looking at them. And my guy's like, there's a line there. It was like a negative 110,000. And I'm like, what's that for? And he's like, oh, that's all the money that you lost on options contracts. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And he's and I knew that I was offside on them, but like I wasn't keeping track. First of all, they're coming every other week, and I'm at that time I'm selling probably I don't know how many, like piles and piles of cows, probably 2,000 or 3,000 cows that year. It was a big year for cattle sales. Yeah. So I was probably making decent money, or assuming I was, because at the end of the year I must have made some money. But it was fascinating to me, first of all, how I was doing something that I had no knowledge of, what I did not understand deeply what I was doing, which I was going to say Bitcoin. I'm going to trigger a few people that are listening, but just investments in general, or just business things in general. So I guess the lesson for me has been, there's been two lessons on both sides of the equation. One is, there's a lesson in, hey, you can lose quite a bit of money. And if you are doing well and working hard and doing the right things and running a decent business, you can absorb some losses. This is part of learning. And I learned a valuable lesson. Like, I'm not saying I would actually love to do those types of things again, but I'm definitely going to be very well educated, or hire someone who I really trust who can explain it to me. I was completely. So what was
driving it? Greed, or like why?
No, just pure, like, this guy's selling me on it. And they probably worked well for a bit. Often things that get us in trouble for a season will work well. They'll help for a season. That's when anywhere in life, it's no different than medicine or drinking. For a season, it might be okay. At some point, hey, the medicine becomes the drug. Yeah. So it was fascinating in that sense. And then, so I found, hey, it's pretty interesting in hindsight, looking back now, we're 7-8 years later, how much money I lost. I survived. It was okay. And it was a hard time. I had a lot of debt back then. And then on the other side, just the piece of kind of like, just not asking advice, not seeking wise counsel, so busy just doing stuff without, just pretty foolish, right? And I think that I've kind of learned, hey, I think I've learned from that, where it's like I think the biggest lesson though is don't let mistakes hold you back from just moving forward. And most people, most people before they even get into something, especially entrepreneurs, will often think of that situation and overthink it and just stand still and not make a decision, or not move forward, or not take the risk.
Wouldn't you say it's more common that they're making the decisions without asking for advice? And then
that's a huge issue too.
And putting in
that's a huge issue.
That's the position you put yourself in, right? Like, you weren't standing still; you were making the decisions, and then
just making a horrible decision. Yeah. But ultimately, I guess I feel like it didn't break me, and I mean, personally, I learned everything the hard way. So, I mean, I could hardly learn another way other than to have a huge loss on the balance sheet. But no, you're right. And I think more today ever than I do ask advice, I ask people. But to some extent, you can always find the person that's going to tell you what you want to hear. So you need to just be willing to, as an entrepreneur, you kind of have to be willing to take some risks. So it was just fascinating that and like I say, today, I'm being honest with you, I was not explaining it properly. Like, I could not explain today even exactly what happened. People that are listening that understands forward contracts and options, like, even in the stock market, I'm invested in the stock market. I can't explain options. Like, I'd like to, but I just don't understand it. So
well, I know people that when I was in Bitcoin and stuff, I got really into that. People were leveraging and buying stuff like that. And it couldn't turn out really well. But
leverage is a beautiful thing, but leverage is also how you get your head cut off.
Exactly, very dangerous. Yeah, very dangerous. Interesting. Okay, but and that is interesting as well, that the U.S. Canadian dollar exchange is what it is.
It's brutal.
Makes a big difference.
That company that I was doing it with in 2017, in 2021. Basically what happens, and there's movies about it, like margin call and stuff. Basically what happens on all areas where there's leverage, there's margin calls. And what happened in 2020, and you can look on your graph of the US Canadian dollar, somewhere in 2020 or 21, it just spiked, similar how it is now, except even more drastic. I think it went to $1.48 very briefly. Well, the company I was using was getting margin calls because they were doing all these contracts and they did not have the margin.
Because they're doing the same thing you're doing, except for on a bigger scale.
Yeah. And they were probably there was just people on the other side of the trades that couldn't follow through, and it just bankrupted the business, right? So, anyways.
Yeah, I mean, it was always like when the exchange rate was really high.
Like when the Canadian dollar was high?
No, it was really low. And like there was a big gap. When I was at MDT, I would get paid commissions. And so it made a big difference. Dollars. Yeah. Because we'd always, most of your sales were in the US. And so, I mean, you could, not have you could have a really good year, but if the exchange changed,
makes a big difference.
It made a big difference.
Yeah. Yeah. And the whole world, and I think that's where Canadians, your general consumer in Canada, does not understand how connected, and they will going forward in the next year if the trend continues, how the high US dollar to Canadian dollar is going to be very inflationary for us, because everything we do is based off the US dollar. The cow prices, the business I'm in, hay, cows, commodities, everything is.
So is that a US economy doing much better than the Canadian economy then?
people would say they are. I mean, the U.S. economy is way more bullish because, you know, they got the your favorite guy there. They got Elon and Vivek in charge of the Doge. What is it called? The DOG.
Doge. The Department of I can't
Government
remember.
Efficiency.
Yeah,
I love it.
Yeah, it is.
I thought it was a joke when I first saw it.
I can't wait. Doge actually jumped. The actual
we live in a meme world. It's a disaster. It's not going to end well. Anyways, I think that the U.S. economy is entirely propped up by government spending too, and I think they're in deep trouble as well. But
I mean, their debt is insane.
Yeah.
So is the Canadian debt. Like what Justin Trudeau has spent more than all the other prime ministers
all
combined.
the other prime ministers combined in
wild.
8 years. It is an abomination.
Like he should
Makes
be in jail.
me rend my clothes.
Literally should be in jail.
He might be yet.
I hope so. Oh, maybe that's a bad thing to want, but just to feel like especially
he's putting our country in a really horrible spot for future generations, which is unfortunate. And when I say he, I mean, is it really just him?
Okay, moving on. Book report, reviewing and discussing insights from a book we're reading.
It's a little more edifying.
We are reading Killjoys, The 7 Deadly Sins, and we are doing a series on that. So last week was pride. This week is envy, which I kind of was not like a sin I ever really think about as like being envious. But we get a little quote here about what envy is. Envy cries over others' wealth. Envy cheers when others stumble. Envy weeps at those who rejoice and rejoices over those who weep. The common features in this sin is a distorted and corrupted desire, a perverse comparison of oneself with others, an ungodly preoccupation with the advantages of others, and a smoldering anger at the blessings of others. Do you find yourself to be envious ever?
Yeah, sometimes I think that a lot of people will right away not want to think they're envious, but the line that you said that was fascinating. See if I can find it here. I mean, people don't want to think that they cheer when another person stumbles, but often, and I know for myself, this is where I've really sinned. It's like just talking about other people's misfortunes or just any of that conversation about somebody else struggling. It's awful.
But that would be gossip unless you're doing it because you're happy about it.
Fair enough. It's definitely gossip, but I just think there's some sense of that gossiping that brings self-satisfaction where it's like, oh, I'm not in that spot. And I think, boy, any of us could be anywhere. It's only by the grace of God that we could be struggling, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What I found was interesting how like some like examples of how envy shows up. So that there's 2 examples here. Men, how do you react when someone else gets a promotion at work? If you were the general in Saul's army, replaced by a young shepherd kid from Bethlehem, what would your reaction be? Would you throw your whole weight behind him, or would you be tempted to undermine his authority and leadership? And that's responding to when King David and Saul in the Bible came back from battle. They came back into the city, whatever, and all the women were singing. Saul killed his thousands. David is 10,000s, and Saul, the king, was super upset about that. And so, this question asks like what we do in that situation. Then also for moms, what is your reaction when someone else's child succeeds? Are you thrilled when someone else's baby learns to walk before yours or learns to talk before yours? Are you constantly eyeing other moms like Saul eyed David, feeling anger and displeasure when God blesses their parenting? Do you murmur when about other mothers behind their backs? I mean, I find like it's very much still rooted in also like just want to be better, pride, trying to get ahead. And you see it in like even little kids, and it talks about that too. Like, you get a little kid in the room is playing with the toy. Another kid comes in and he wants that toy. And then, he puts it away, grabs the other one, he wants that one. We want what usually the other person, has.
Yeah. Another thought I thought under the page 22 there where it says a pack of wolves. The first thing to do is understand that the nature of the foe or foes, as the case may be, for envy, like all sins, hunts in a pack. It's always accompanied by a band of vicious wolves, and it's helpful to know and name this wolf pack so that we can sniff out their stalking in our own lives. We begin with the alpha male himself. Envy is a feeling of unhappiness, the blessing and fortune of others. In the words of Merriam-Webster, it is the painful and often resentful awareness of an advantage enjoyed by someone else. And I think that a lot of people, a lot of their dissatisfaction in their life, from what I see from people around me, is that they're spending too many time looking at people that they think are, not even that necessarily are doing better, but just they think they are because they're looking from the outside in. And it comes back to where I've always said it's good to spend time with people that are struggling, people that are in a tough situation. It helps their gratitude. And then he says, we often lump envy and jealousy together, but there's an important distinction. Jealousy is oriented toward what we possess, and envy is oriented toward the possessions of others.
And their success.
Yeah.
And wanting their downfall.
Yeah. What did you feel like the answer to the envy was? Or I thought there's one part that really stood out to me, but.
What do you mean the answer?
Well, just a solution. I mean, obviously it's to repent if we're doing it, but what are some of the practical ways?
It's the answer to all sin. If we test ourselves and fail, what hope do we have? Like if you realize, oh shit, I'm a really envious person. How do we deal with this? And much in every way, we have the cross of Christ. We have the grace of God. We have the deep joy and gladness of knowing God in Christ. So, I think it's the gospel again. Like when we're satisfied in Jesus and who He is for us and the life that He's given us, then you can celebrate others. And the end of that chapter talks about that. It says, "Grateful people do not envy; indeed, they cannot." We should also be thankful for what God gives to others. This is a true sign of a new heart. When you look at what God gives to other people and not to you, and say, thank you, Lord, because you have been so kind to them and so kind to me. The opposite of envy is celebrating other people, right? I mean, that's something that I think as a culture, we don't do that well. Yeah. Or, in families or whatever else like that, like our friends, stuff like that, when someone else wins and like, let's celebrate them, lift them up instead of, saying nothing.
Yeah. These are the practical things, like, and you read one of them already, but like we have all the experiences in our house with people that are struggling in our home. And it's like unmarried folks, when your friend gets a girlfriend or boyfriend or gets engaged or gets married, are you genuinely happy for them? Are you filled with gratitude that God has brought them such a wonderful blessing? Or inwardly, are you carping about the fact that you've been passed by once again? Young people, how do you respond when your friends and siblings are blessed by God, when they make the team or they work, right? You mentioned that. And it's like, I think that in our culture, do we really celebrate other people? For Marie and I, we couldn't have kids, right? And it's like she went through this tough period. And it's not that you're not allowed to grieve or be sad or cry out to God because, your needs are not being met. But those are two separate things, right? You're allowed to share your frustration with Him while still being grateful for others and joyful for others and not letting it turn into
and it's usually the people we envy are generally not the people that are like way ahead of us. It's usually our peers that are like just a little bit ahead of us. It says that too. And
it does say that. Yeah.
And you can see that in I think it especially shows up in business, right? When you're competing with other businesses for the same thing, usually we're envious.
We're not envious of Elon Musk.
No,
but the other hay dealer that just seems to be selling a little more hay than me and doing a little better. Yeah, totally. Yeah, great chapter.
Or
pretty convicting.
Or anything. But you being in business, stuff like that, you have competition and stuff like that. Has there been seasons where you like think back, maybe now even?
Yeah, even now. So this is another plug for a podcast, Business Wars podcast on, I listen to it on Apple Podcasts. Awesome podcast, many, many episodes. Noah and I listen to it. My kids and I listen to it all the time. And the other day, Noah he's like, do you have friendly competitors, Dad, or do you want to like kill the competition? I'm like, because there's this guy's using hyperbole and he's very descriptive. It's like Sony versus Microsoft and the gaming thing, or hotel chains against each other and stuff like that. Mars versus Hershey. And I said, honestly, like I have all friendly competitors. All my competitors, the guys that are doing what I do for the most part, I could talk to or buy them lunch or share if we have a problem customer. And a guy a long time ago, a big dairy farmer here in the valley, he's a good guy, but they've been really good to me, good customer. He said to me many, many years ago when I was just starting out, and it's always stuck with me. He said, never forget, Gary, that there's enough wealth for everybody, right? There's enough wealth for everybody.
Enough fish in the pond.
There's enough, and there is. And it's like, the Lord will give you, and sometimes he'll only give you, what he thinks you can handle. And if you're immature and you're young and you're like, you can't handle a lot of wealth, maybe you're not going to get a lot of sales right away. And we got to be okay with
focusing on the competition also never helps.
No, it doesn't. No.
Like focus on making a better product. Focus on your customers.
Selling better, caring for,
better, like service well, stuff like that. I mean,
I
think that's really important.
Yeah.
Okay. Next segment is Furiously Curious. But before we get there, show sponsor today is Mini Built Structures. If you need a small shed to put away your stuff for the winter, or a garage for your motorbike, or even a small office in your backyard, check out minibuiltsheds.com. They have inventory in stock, and we'll build you a custom shed to whatever you need or whatever style you want as well.
Do they deliver it and install it?
They install it and deliver it, yeah.
Okay.
I'm not sure how far they deliver, but I'm pretty sure if you pay them enough,
they'll get her anywhere.
They'll get her anywhere. Yeah, so Justin and James and the team make high quality stuff for a great price. So if you're interested in that, check out minibuiltsheds.com.
Nice.
Okay, Furiously Curious. I want to talk about anti-Semitism. And this came up because my coach is a Jewish person. The full race Jew. And she was sharing with me that they're going to go do a trip to Europe in a couple weeks. And a couple days ago in Amsterdam, there was a soccer match between Ajax, which is the Dutch team, and Maccabi Tel Aviv. And
So obviously the Israeli team. The Israeli team, yeah.
And after the match, there was a whole bunch of guys, I think younger guys, that went and hunted down these Jewish fans and attacked them and like asked for their passports and like beat the crap out of them and stuff like that.
These are Dutch nationals that are doing this? Or not necessarily?
Not necessarily. I wouldn't be surprised. Holland has a huge population of Moroccans and stuff like that, and Arab population, which is generally more anti-Semitic. But I'll just read a little piece here from the news. Some Israeli fans said they were ordered to show their passports when they were set upon. Gal Binyamin, which is definitely an Israeli name, 29, told the BBC he was attacked on Wednesday outside a casino after watching a different football game. We faced around 20 people who ran towards us. They asked me where I was from, and I said from Greece. They said they didn't believe me, and they asked for my passport. When he told them he didn't have it, the men beat him, pushed him to the ground, and kicked his face. I don't remember anything after that, and when I woke up in the ambulance with blood over my face, I realized they had broken 2 of my teeth. British men, Aaron and Jacob, who are Jewish, told the BBC they went to the match but left early. Afterwards, they saw a man yelling anti-Semitic threats and stamping an Israeli man. They intervened, helped the man to his feet, and went to leave. Shortly after that, a group asked the men if they were Jewish, and Aaron said they were British, but they said, "You helped the Jew," and he punched me in the face and broke my glasses. I was bleeding, I had a black eye, but I'm okay and a bit shaken. And so I'm thinking about this, and I'm like, why is there actually so much anti-Semitism in the world? Like, what is this? Even with like Palestine and Israel fighting right now, like huge swaths of like people in North America as well, big protests in Vancouver and Toronto and the States and stuff like that. It's super pro-Palestine, anti-Jew, anti-Jewish people, anti-Israel. Where does that come from? Talking to a guy at lunch about it, and he said it was like, he thinks it's rooted even in like related to the Bible and stuff like that. But yeah, I don't know the answer, and it fascinates me. Do you know?
No, I don't know. I don't understand the conflict probably as well as I should.
But even outside the conflict, there's tons of anti-Semitism.
Yeah, that's just pure racism.
But it's specific. Like there's so population-wise,
there's such a small amount of Jews, and they are so well hated on.
Yeah,
I don't know. I mean, even now, like I love World War history, right? Yeah. Like I love I just feel like we were taught it well in school, and it's relevant, and I think it's important to know these things. It's really affected our family because we literally immigrated we did, right? My grandparents came over in the 50s with my parents when they were very little, and I feel like
is that because of the flood or the war? I think it was the flood, no?
Well, it was probably both. Right. There was like one of the memorabilia, I don't know where it went, but like my Oma had like their house was shelled, like there was like furniture with like so I think that there wasn't much left there. There wasn't much future, and I think that we as parents, totally an aside, but we as parents should be the same way. We should be thinking, hey, is this where we should be open to moving and making big shifts for our children if it's for the betterment of our children. Our grandparents did it.
Including like spending more time at home and working less.
Yeah, or just moving to Texas or I don't know, whatever, or Belize.
Yeah. Let's go.
But I think that, I just feel like at that time, like, first of all, things that are not right should not make sense. So to have a deep understanding of something that is wrong, like when someone says, oh, I don't understand that. I don't know how somebody could hurt somebody like that. How could somebody, like when somebody's molested or something awful happens, like you're not supposed to grasp things that are not meant to be happening.
Yeah, it's fair. Yeah.
Right? So I feel like a lot of people spend way too much time trying to decipher things like something like racism or, somebody because of the color of the skin or who they are, where they're from, the fact that we're looking on them as a lesser person. Like none of us should be able to grasp that concept.
Do you think because the Jewish people are God's chosen race that Satan hates them more because he hates God so much and that he attacks them more?
I'm sure there's people that feel that way. I haven't thought about that much. I mean, I don't know where it stems from. It'd be interesting to talk to, I think really you'd want to be interviewing Arabs and people that can articulate. There's people that are very knowledgeable and people that are devout Christians that are fairly pro-Palestine, I think, simply because of the fact that, the Palestinian people just get bombed to crap by the Israeli government, right? Is that a fair statement or not? Or am I oversimplifying?
Well, I'm sure there is people that believe that.
Yeah.
I mean, I would disagree with their viewpoint.
Yeah.
But I mean, you can get any viewpoint you want out there. But
I had someone recently who lives in the Middle East at our house, and man, he was able to articulate really well. And I don't think it's.
Well, I think we're talking about two separate issues here. We're talking if we're talking about the war.
That's a whole nother conversation. But you're talking about pure on, like somebody just at a soccer game. They're from Israel.
Yeah, like
they're Jewish people, and they're just literally getting beat to.
Yeah, but even in Canada, I think my coach's husband told me.
Yeah, so that's being defended. This is the problem now in our country. That's being defended because of the war, where there's some justification for protest, and that's becoming a big issue.
I mean, there was anti-Semitism 5 years ago too, and 10 years ago. Like
not to the extent that there has been lately, and it's being way more. Yeah, okay, being way more defended by a larger group of people in a certain camp because of what's happening.
But it is weird. But it is weird that it's being defended by like all the hyper liberals, like Palestine, Queers for Palestine. Like if I've been to Israel, it is one of the most liberal countries in the world. Super pro LGBTQ, super pro gay. Like they're very inclusive to everyone.
Hamas, not so much.
No, like you're not going to last long. You're going to get everything chopped.
That's the other thing, and I think that's what I got from the person too. It's like, and granted, they're the government there, but the Palestinian people are not Hamas, right?
No,
right. And I think you have, but like you say, those are separate issues from people that are just pure race, are racist against as Jewish people in our country and in Europe.
Well, I guess that's why the segment's called Furiously Curious, because we don't have the
answer.
We don't have
the answer.
But yeah, maybe I should get someone on the podcast.
We should. You should get some. You would have the capability, and I'd be fascinated to listen to it, just hear the different perspectives.
Yeah. Okay, moving on. We are going to go over to personal playlist. Gary wants to.
Don't play it. Don't play it. Don't play it. Don't play it.
Why not?
Don't play it. I said don't play it. Don't play it.
Trying to control.
Pardon?
What do you want to talk about this song? Gary wants to share a song.
I didn't want to share the particular song. I just think if people, it's going to be a genre that a bunch of the listeners are going to hate and despise.
You're too worried what the listeners think. It's called Letting It Go by Joe Nestor.
Yeah. Joe Nestor music.
What did you like?
What did I like about it? I like, it's kind of like rappy, but not like Lecrae Christian rap. Some people now are short circuiting. I love it. I know the crowd. But anyways, I love Joe Nestor music, and I listen to it with my son.
So this particular song, I mean, I'll pull up the lyrics here, but you said you were greatly encouraged by it this week.
I think that, well, why am I encouraged by it?
Yeah. Like, why did you send it to me yesterday and said, like, this is like...
It's a great song?
Yeah.
Because you probably never heard that guy.
No, I didn't, but why were you encouraged by it? You said you were encouraged by it.
I just really like his music. It's catchy music. And the guy's story, he basically was a drug addict, right? For many years, lived on the streets. And, he talks about worshiping God with the same arms that he used to, like, shoot drugs into.
Yeah.
And I feel like, I had lunch with a guy today. We were talking about, the extended family of some of my adopted children and the struggles they have. And I feel like, hey, anybody can be saved, right? Miracles do happen. Don't give up on the Lord. Plead for the salvation and the saving of those that are on the streets. And yeah, I feel like we're in I don't know. I just really think it's cool when someone can come from that low of a spot to be just praising the Lord with their music and
sharing it
and in a catchy way. Like a lot of Christians stuff is not great, right? Like Christian movies in the past have been horrible, and Christian books and Christian music is often,
which never used to be that way. Ironically, it used to be like the Christians that were always leading in music and stuff like that.
And culture were amazing. So I feel like there is some,
which we need to get back to. There's been actually Pastor Matt talked about this in a little bit in his series of deconstructing faith, about how the ways the church or Christians have hurt their own people is by like pushing against us, like being innovative and stuff like that. Like universities were started by Christians. Like it was like Harvard and
all these amazing
Yale and all these places, stuff like that. But also in science and in music, stuff like that. They were leading, and now the quality of our music has gone way down. But I do appreciate. I listened to the song, and I do very much appreciate his lyrics and stuff like that. and what he was. I think that's the most important. Like a genre is a genre, whatever. I think it's neutral.
Whatever type of music, no, it doesn't matter.
But
what
the
comes
words
out of your
were
mouth
just really
matters.
good, so, yeah.
And on that note of culture, even like I watched football the other day, and there was like an NFL kicker, quarterback, just like praising the Lord and giving the Lord credit for everything. And I think, it's just really special, right? We live in a very secular culture compared to what we did, 40, 50, 60 years ago, right?
Yeah.
And post-Christian, I think Pastor Matt would say. And I think, we take that for we don't understand that as much because we live in Chilliwack, but in a lot of areas in bigger cities, right, it's pretty dark. So it's pretty cool when people can publicly profess.
Okay, guys.
Is that our last segment?
Yeah, we got two more. So thanks for listening. We're going to keep this conversation going in overtime. We're going to do two more segments. One is the confessional, where we share a recent slip-up or regret and its lesson, and church stuff, discussing some common questions about church life and faith. And we'll be talking about the qualifications of being a church member. And
on the Patreon.
So you can watch those. Head over the link in the description, or you can go to patreon.com/furiously curious. But you can also listen to them on Spotify now if you want. So if you want to check those out, go ahead. And thanks again. Cheers.
Good song to end the podcast with.
Forward a bit.
The weight of the world feels like a weight in my soul that I carry around everywhere that I go. It's hard to escape from the things.
Okay, overtime. We are going to go the confessional. The host reveals a recent slip-up or regret and its lesson. So we talked about Jews in the main podcast. This week I was talking to